And this brings us to the second lesson of the Solacene, and that is thinking outside of the box, because these specific octopus that she was studying for hundreds and, dare I say, thousands of years, they were thought to be these octopuses. They're the only one that have shells. And weirdly enough, they're not attached to their shells. So they're similar to hermit crabs in that way, but hermit crabs steal their shells, obviously. People thought that these guys also stole their shells because they're not attached. They're kind of a weird shape. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I saw the pictures. They look like... They look a little bit more like a mollusk than they do an octopus or something.
Yeah, so they have these little hat shells, but they also have 2 of their 8 legs are really big. They're kind of like hands. And so there's these like ancient drawings of these creatures, and everyone up until Jeanne thought that they used the shell as a boat and the big hands as a sail.
Honestly, that sounds cool, and I'm going to steal that for a book.
Well, you know who did steal it? Jules Verne.
Villain of the week. Ba-da, ba-da-da. Whoa.
Holy cow!
I should give that a rest, I think. The precise moment when most people click off this video. That was...
Is Jules Verne the villain of the week?
The villain of the week is Captain Nemo.
Okay.
So it's kind of similar that we came across those things independently.
Yeah.
And I, as you know, was struggling for a villain of the week because your suggestion was the patriarchy, and I was like, I don't want to be that person talking about that on the episode. So I was like, I'll choose a fictional villain, Captain Nemo. But then the more I remembered of 20,000 Leagues, it's been a while since I read that one, I realized that he's not actually a villain. He's kind of my absolute role model in life. Yeah. I don't have it exactly, but he was talking about how he doesn't identify with any people. He only identifies with the oppressed sea life. And obviously he changes his name and lives in a submarine very far beneath and collects a bunch of cool stuff and plays the organ very well. So, I mean, can we make a... He's
misanthropic.
He's misanthropic. He's consumed by hate. And the reason that I came to him is because Jeanne Villepeux, she was something of a victim during her life. I mean, maybe not out of the ordinary for a woman living in the 1800s, but as you said, she was kind of turned away by all the scientific societies of the era, which I would think ordinarily or today she would be quite celebrated in. And also there was a story about how on that walk to Paris, she was like mugged and had all her things stolen or something like that. And I was just kind of contrasting what she went on to do with her life with what Captain Nemo kind of shelled himself away and became, really consumed by vengeance towards his wrongdoers, which were imperialists. And I mean, he's not a villain because he does help people, but he's maybe a little bit more of an anti-hero or a tragic figure.
So yeah, the name of these fairly special octopus, which I kind of want a drawing of now. I'm just really obsessed with them.
Did you see her drawing of them?
Yeah, that's the only surviving drawing of hers.
She was also a weirdly talented
That's the thing.
drawer.
She's just a Renaissance woman. Like her painting, this is the only one that survived of the Argonauts. She always decided to do biological drawings, but have them set in like the right setting. So it's not just like a biological drawing of the octopus.
Yeah.
It's on some coral.
I like
there's a
that.
starfish beside it.
It made it
just
look
so
like
pretty.
more of a, I don't know, Michelangelo painting or something like that.
And get to it later, but all of her work, all of her paintings were lost in a shipwreck. Very, very...
Cinematic.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe we need to make the Jeanne movie. So, yeah, they're called Argonauts. Again, another literary reference. She didn't name them, but they were named after the Argonauts in...
Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah, Jason and the Argonauts. And so they were like, these guys were even before the real Argonauts because obviously they have their boats and their sails. So they named them Argonauts. And I just think that's really fun. They were first named Nautilus because there was a similar looking creature and they kind of thought they were both Nautilus. But then they slowly realized that they were two different species.
I want to pull another lesson from this for the Solacene, which sounds like a really childish one, but it's about overcoming your fears. Because though I am really fascinated and at times enamored with the ocean, it also terrifies me. And I think this is a big part of the fascination especially the deep. And also, I think just weird creatures creep me out.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I'm quite jumpy. If I see a shadow that I don't quite like the shape of, I will kick it. And I think if I were to see eels, because there's some things that it's like you see pictures of, you can stare at it all day.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other things that when you're around them, it's a different story. And I think these kind of weird squids are one. I think, and octopus. I actually made randomly for this was a high school project to choose our spirit animal.
Mm-hmm.
I chose a squid. I did.
Interesting.
But what I'm saying is that if I was actually around them, I think I would be quite spooked by them. The way they move, they're alien. If imagine if it kind of went onto your wrist and you couldn't shake it off.
Yeah,
you'd be creeped out.
I'm especially terrified of squid, octopus, and submarines.
Submarines.
Those are some of probably my biggest fears.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I mean, we don't know if Jeanne was ever spooked by these things. I think most people have at least a hesitation initially. You see these weird alien creatures, and she knew even, or was even less familiar with the sight of them than we are today, ironically. But it's about kind of compartmentalizing said unknowns, maybe literally in compartments or cabinets, and familiarizing yourself with them, learning about them, and you become more comfortable and less scared. And I think it's a good general rule in life or ambition to try to become less scared.
I like that.
Yeah.
Do you want to know what the big hands are used for?
Okay. Going back to
the Argonauts. Sorry, I can't get over them. So
Can I guess?
Yeah, sure.
Do they play drums?
No.
Oh, I thought if there was like a big ocean jamboree, they'd be the ones going ba 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 ba.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if we in the movie they can
of course
play that role.
I mean, that song might be taken, but
So everyone thought the big hands were used as sails. They thought that the Argonauts stole their shells because when they're born, they're very tiny, and it's like they probably don't really have shells. But actually, what they have is this really tiny. They're born without shells, but then they put the hands over their heads, kind of like a hat, and then secrete shell material, and they make the shells with their hands.
That sounds like a Pokemon.
It's the only creature that does that. Because a lot of them, they make their shells through mineralization, kind of it builds and builds and builds.
Yeah.
But they just in a few days, they're like, well, I'm gonna just make this shell, and they do it with their hands. And if it breaks, what do? They'll take the broken piece and they'll heal it with their shell, with their hand. It's just the craziest thing. Very Pokemon, very fake.
I feel like Jeanne might have been lying about that. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, the thing is, she wasn't.
It's been studied afterwards.
Yeah, it's been studied after. It's not she just told everyone that, and it was oh, and they actually are extinct. So they can't.
Yeah, no, they put their hands over their head and they make it.
Yeah.
What if it breaks? They fix it.
Yeah, that was one of the first experiments she did, was breaking their shells to see what they did. And
ethical.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it doesn't hurt them.
How do you know?
It's not a part of them. It's like cutting hair, which you still can't wrap your head around. I know.
I'm convinced that cutting hair hurts.